awareness is a strange kind of light. Not the warm kind that guides you gently through darkness. A ceiling light that never turns off. It illuminates everything, every pause in a conversation, every shift in tone, every fracture running beneath a surface that everyone else sees as smooth. Most people move through life with the lights dimmed, just enough to function. They notice what they need to notice, and no more. But some minds don't have that switch. For them, awareness is always on. And while that might sound like a gift, it often feels like living without curtains. This is not intelligence. It is not sensitivity as a personality trait. It is something more specific, a wakefulness that never learned how to rest. A mind that learned to stay alert, so well it forgot how to sleep while awake. For the overly aware person, life is not a series of simple moments. It is an equation, quiet, invisible, constantly running in the background. You don't just hear what someone says. You notice how long they paused before saying it. You catch the half second, a smile faded too early. You feel the weight of what wasn't written. A second screen is always open. One side of you participating, the other observing, calculating, adjusting. Social reality gets treated the way an engineer treats a system. If something changes, there must be a reason. So the mind begins searching for it. Conversations get replayed. Patterns get tracked. None of this feels dramatic from the inside. It feels responsible, thoughtful, even necessary. But something subtle happens over time. The equation starts to replace the experience. So busy solving what life means that you're rarely allowed to simply be inside it. Presence gets traded for precision. Psychology calls this metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. For most people, it flickers on occasionally. For the overly aware, it rarely turns off. You don't just feel an emotion. You notice you're feeling it, ask why, evaluate whether it makes sense, and wonder what it says about you. By the time the emotion has finished moving through your body, your mind has already dissected it from every angle. Sadness doesn't arrive alone. It arrives with questions. Is this justified? Is this proportional? Is this old? Or is this about now? Even joy isn't spared. You can feel happy and almost simultaneously step outside of it, watching yourself be happy, already calculating how long it will last. It is like dancing while constantly checking your reflection in the mirror. You may perfect the steps, but you lose the music. The mind was never meant to be both the dancer and the critic at the same time. At a certain depth, awareness stops being a lens and becomes a revelation. You begin to see behind the curtain of human behavior, and once you do, something quietly changes. You notice that kindness can carry conditions, that affection sometimes comes with unspoken expectations, that many interactions are about reassurance, image, or fear rather than connection. Not because people are cruel, because they are human. Compliments feel layered, apologies feel incomplete. You can still appreciate the moment, but you are always aware of what might be happening beneath it. This is where a quiet grief begins, not the grief of loss, but the grief of knowledge. The grief of losing relational innocence, the ability to take words as words, gestures as gestures, and love as something uncomplicated. Communication becomes something you translate instead of receive. And that insight, while accurate, can be isolating. Because when you can see the strings, the lighting, and the fragile mechanics holding everything together, even a beautiful performance carries the knowledge of how easily it could fall apart. That knowledge doesn't make you cynical, it makes you careful, and sometimes a little lonely. If this is resonating, if you recognize this particular kind of tiredness, take a moment to like this video. It helps more people find this conversation. And if exploring the deeper psychology of human behavior is something you want to keep doing, subscribe. This is exactly what we do here. For the overly aware, empathy is not something that switches on for important conversations. It is always running in the background, a system that never sleeps. You don't just listen to what people say. You feel the weight beneath it. You sense when someone is holding back before they've said a word. You notice the shift in posture, the tightening in voice. Psychology distinguishes between cognitive empathy, understanding another's inner world, and what happens here, absorption. Emotions don't stop at the edge of awareness. They move in. A tense room leaves your chest tight hours later. A friend's unspoken sadness follows you home. You become the person others feel safe with, the one who makes people feel seen. But when you're always tuned to everyone else's emotional frequency, you carry feelings that were never yours. You become the emotional container, absorbing, translating, smoothing the room. And when you are always the one who understands, no one thinks to check whether you need understanding too. Empathy that never powers down teaches you to disappear inside that connection, until you are carrying more than one nervous system at a time. This awareness also lives in the body. Psychology calls it interoception, the capacity to sense internal states like heartbeat, breath, and tension. Everyone has it, but in some nervous systems it is turned very high. You notice your heart rate change before the thought that triggered it arrives. A flutter becomes a warning. Fatigue becomes a signal. Restlessness becomes a problem to solve rather than a sensation that can pass. Sensation triggers interpretation. Interpretation triggers tension. Tension creates more sensation. The body becomes a data stream the mind cannot stop reading. This level of awareness did not appear from nowhere. It has a history. For many people, hyper-awareness begins in childhood not as a trait, but as an adaptation. In environments where moods shifted without warning and safety depended on reading subtle cues, awareness wasn't a choice. It was a survival requirement. You learned to scan the room the moment you entered it, to feel the emotional temperature before deciding whether to speak, to become quiet or agreeable or just slightly invisible when the situation required it. No one taught you explicitly. Your nervous system learned it for you. Over time, vigilance turned into awareness, and awareness became identity. You stopped thinking of yourself as someone who was watching. You began to think of yourself as someone who was responsible. What feels like overthinking is the residue of intelligence shaped by survival. The sensitivity was never born from fragility. It was forged in adaptation. And the tragedy is that what once kept you safe doesn't always know when to stand down. As an adult, your environment may be stable. Your relationships may be calm. But your nervous system still operates as if something could change at any moment. So it keeps scanning, keeps listening, keeps preparing. You are not tired because life is too demanding. You are tired because your system never learned that it is allowed to rest. Understanding this origin replaces self-judgment with context. It allows compassion to enter where criticism used to live, and it points towards something that can actually change. The solution to over-awareness is not seeing less. It is carrying less. Not every signal is an assignment. Not every shift in tone requires a response. Not every insight needs to be followed to its conclusion. Psychology calls the alternative selective perception, noticing without absorbing, recognizing without reacting, allowing certain things to pass through awareness rather than lodge inside it. 3 quiet truths begin to recalibrate the system. Not every silence is a message. Not every feeling needs action, and not every understanding needs expression. Awareness without boundaries turns into suffering. Awareness with boundaries becomes clarity. When this shift begins, and it is slow, and it takes practice, something changes in the body before it changes in the mind. The nervous system gradually learns that noticing does not equal danger, that it does not have to stay one step ahead of life to be safe, that it is possible to laugh without checking why, to feel without immediately translating, to listen without already preparing a response. Awareness, when it is softened by acceptance, stops feeling like a spotlight. It starts feeling like warmth. You still notice deeply, but you don't cling. You still feel intensely, but you let the feelings move through without interrogating every one of them. You still see behind the curtain, but you no longer need to hold it open constantly. Presence replaces prediction. Curiosity replaces fear. And life, the same life, with the same weight becomes, finally, something you are inside of, not something you are managing from a careful, exhausted distance. Have you ever felt this specific kind of tiredness, not from doing too much, but from noticing too much, carrying what you've noticed for too long. Leave it in the comments. More people live inside this particular silence than the world has ever thought to name. Thank you for watching.